Explorers, Captain Rogers began, standing at the helm of the horizon. His gaze swept over the attentive faces of his crew, their expressions a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Let me tell you a story about the time humans taught the most advanced civilization in the galaxy a lesson in humility. A story that still echoes across the stars. It all started when the Arxo Empire decided humanity needed to be corrected, Rogers explained, a hint of a smirk playing on his lips. You see, they believed their perfection was the ultimate form of existence. Their ships, massive, shimmering beasts of technology, descended upon Earth with weapons that could turn entire planets into cosmic dust. And they were polite about it too. Gave us 24 hours to surrender. How considerate. The crew chuckled uneasily, imagining the scene Rogers described. He continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. Our flagship, the Prometheus, stood as Earth's last line of defense. Chief Engineer Thad Jong was there, staring at the holographic display of those impossibly advanced ships. He muttered something about reality TV shows finally catching up to us. But even as he joked, he was calculating, because Thad didn't believe in perfection. And that, explorers, was the key. The Arxo weren't just advanced, they were too advanced. Their ships ran on systems so standardized, so perfectly in sync, that they left no room for error. Every single ship communicated, processed, and executed commands the same way. And that was their weakness. Rogers leaned in slightly, his voice taking on the tone of a storyteller, drawing his audience closer. Thad saw it immediately. Perfection, he said, is perfectly vulnerable. And he wasn't alone in this realization. Lieutenant Commander Riley O'Malley, a cyber warfare genius with a rebellious streak as wide as the Milky Way, agreed. Together, they devised a plan to turn the Arxo's perfection into their downfall. You might think we used our best tech to fight theirs, Rogers said, grinning. Wrong. Our most advanced weapons barely scratched their shields. The Arxo didn't even use their main weapons to swat us down. They used point defense systems. That's like fighting a dragon, and it slapping you with its tail while yawning. The crew laughed, some shaking their heads in disbelief. Rogers continued. So Thad and Riley turned to something the Arxo had never accounted for, primitive technology. They discovered that while the Arxo had fortified their systems against the most sophisticated attacks, they'd completely ignored the basics. Old-school radio waves, analog signals, even corrupted code. They were invisible to Arxo sensors. Riley called it Operation Digital Stone Age. They collected every outdated, messy, and inefficient signal humanity had ever created. Morse code, dial-up modem sounds, AM radio waves, even the good old Nokia ringtone. You name it, they found it. Their plan? To flood the Arxo fleet's quantum network with so much nonsense that their perfect systems would collapse under the weight of imperfection. Rogers chuckled, the memory clearly as absurd as it was brilliant. Admiral Chun, understandably, thought they were insane. But when you're up against a fleet that can turn your planet into glittering stardust, crazy starts looking like your best option. With minutes to spare before the Arxo opened fire, Thad and Riley unleashed their chaotic masterpiece. The signals hit the fleet like a tidal wave of nonsense. Their perfectly synchronized systems, designed to handle precision and logic, began to stutter and fail. Imagine a symphony orchestra suddenly forced to play with every instrument out of tune. It was beautiful. The crew erupted in laughter, picturing the chaos Rogers described. He raised a hand, motioning for them to listen as he continued. The Arxo ships started misfiring, drifting out of formation, and even turning their weapons on each other. Their pride, their perfection, their supposed invincibility, it all fell apart because of AM radio and corrupted internet protocols. And the best part? They tried to fight back, broadcasting messages like, "Cease your primitive interference." Primitive. Can you believe that? But it worked, Rogers said, his tone turning serious. Their fleet crumbled. We didn't destroy them, we didn't have to. We made them destroy themselves. And as their ships limped away, unable to reconnect to their perfect network, humanity had won. Not through strength, not through advanced technology, but through ingenuity, adaptability, and a little chaos. The surrender negotiations were tense, Rogers admitted, his smirk returning. Imagine telling the most advanced civilization in the galaxy that they needed to fix their systems by adding imperfection. Their faces, if you could call them that, looked offended beyond belief. But they agreed. Peace was restored. And humanity? We proved that our greatest strength isn't in our weapons or even our technology. It's in our messiness, our creativity, our ability to turn chaos into a weapon. Rogers straightened, his gaze sweeping the room. So explorers, remember this. Perfection isn't invincible. It's the cracks, the flaws, and the chaos that make us stronger. The Arxo thought they could conquer us because they didn't understand that. But now they do. And the galaxy? It still tells stories about the day humanity stopped being nice and showed the power of imperfection. The crew erupted in cheers, inspired by their captain's tale. Rogers smiled, stepping back to let the moment sink in. As the stars stretched endlessly beyond the viewport, one thing was clear. Humanity's story was far from over. Explorers, Captain Rogers began, standing on the bridge of the horizon. His commanding presence filled the room, but there was something in his tone that hinted at both gravity and pride. The story I'm about to tell you, it's not just another mission log. It's a lesson, a reminder of what makes us human. It's about the time we faced the mightiest fleet the galaxy has ever seen, and showed them that perfection is no match for ingenuity. The crew leaned in, their anticipation palpable. Rogers gestured toward the stars beyond the viewport. It started here, in the vast emptiness of space, where the Arxo Empire made a terrible mistake. They believed they had already won. The room dimmed as Rogers activated a holographic projection. It displayed the Arxo fleet, a massive, shimmering armada that seemed to devour the light around it. Their ships glowed with an eerie, iridescent sheen, like oil slicks floating in the void. They called themselves the Arxo Empire, Rogers explained, his voice laced with disdain. And they weren't just another alien power looking for a fight. No, they were different. Their technology was so advanced it made our best weapons look like children's toys. They didn't see us as adversaries. They saw us as insects. The hologram shifted, showing the Earth surrounded by Arxo vessels. Their weapon ports bristled with energy, promising annihilation. They gave us 24 hours to surrender, Rogers continued, and I'll never forget their words. Resistance is inadvisable. Not futile, inadvisable. Like they couldn't be bothered to crush us unless we made them work for it. And there we were, Rogers said, his voice tightening. The Prometheus, Earth's flagship, floating like a rubber duck in a tsunami. On its bridge stood Chief Engineer Thad Jong, a man with wire-rimmed glasses and a knack for turning disasters into opportunities. He stared at the Arxo fleet, muttering something about humanity finally paying for broadcasting reality TV into space. The crew chuckled, but Rogers' expression remained serious. Behind the jokes, Thad saw something the rest of us missed, a crack in their armor. The Arxo ships were perfect, flawlessly synchronized, running on identical systems with zero variation. And Thad, being the genius he was, realized something crucial. Perfection isn't strength. It's a weakness waiting to be exploited. Rogers paused, letting the weight of the moment settle over his audience. Thad wasn't alone in seeing the opportunity. Lieutenant Commander Riley O'Malley joined him, an unorthodox cyber warfare specialist with a cybernetic eye and a mohawk that screamed rebellion. Together, they hatched a plan so audacious it bordered on insanity. He grinned, the memory of the moment clearly vivid. While the Arxo were busy flaunting their quantum encryption and god-tier weapons, Thad and Riley dug into our technological history. They realized the Arxo were so advanced they'd forgotten the basics. Analog signals, old-school radio waves, even corrupted code. They were invisible to the Arxo because they didn't consider them threats. Rogers stepped forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. And that's when Riley came up with the name, Operation Digital Stone Age. They collected every outdated, messy, and inefficient signal humanity had ever created. Morse code, fax machine noises, even the Nokia ringtone. Their plan? To overwhelm the Arxo's perfect systems with a flood of primitive chaos. The holographic display shifted to show the Prometheus engineering lab. Rows of consoles flashed with data as Thad and Riley worked furiously, coordinating their efforts. Admiral Chen was skeptical, Rogers said, a smirk tugging at his lips. And who could blame him? The fate of humanity, resting on dial-up modem sounds and pager signals? It sounded absurd, but as Thad put it, we're going to die anyway. Might as well make it memorable. Rogers' voice grew more animated as he described the preparations. They compiled decades of human technology, every failed protocol, every outdated communication method, every mistake we ever made. And when they tested it, the Arxo systems didn't even register the signals. It was like throwing rocks at a quantum computer. But those rocks? They were about to cause an avalanche. The Arxo weren't just sitting idle, Rogers continued, his tone darkening. Their ships moved into attack formation, their weapon ports glowing with enough energy to vaporize continents. Admiral Chen launched a conventional counterattack, quantum-tipped missiles, stealth ships, you name it. The Arxo swatted them away like gnats. The hologram showed Earth's fleet being systematically dismantled, its ships reduced to drifting debris. Chen's tactics bought us 6 minutes and 38 seconds, Rogers said grimly. And then, it was up to Thad and Riley. And then, Rogers said, his voice swelling with pride, we flipped the switch. The hologram displayed waves of primitive signals cascading toward the Arxo fleet, analog noise, binary garbage, corrupted packets. The alien ships faltered, their perfect formations breaking as their systems struggled to process the chaos. It was beautiful, Rogers said, his grin widening. Their ships started misfiring, drifting out of sync. The Arxo sent panicked messages. Cease your primitive interference. Primitive. They had no idea how to handle it. The hologram showed the Arxo fleet descending into chaos, their once flawless movements reduced to erratic flailing. Thad and Riley didn't just disrupt their systems, Rogers explained. They turned the Arxo's greatest strength, standardization, into their undoing. Their entire fleet was so rigid, so dependent on perfection, that one flaw became a cascade of failures. By the end, they couldn't even fire their weapons without hitting each other. Rogers' tone softened as he described the final moments. The Arxo retreated, their ships limping away, unable to reconnect to their network. And when it came time for negotiations, let's just say they were very motivated to avoid another encounter with Earth's primitive technology. He gestured to the stars, his expression one of quiet triumph. The Arxo learned a hard lesson that day. Perfection is fragile. Humanity's strength lies in our chaos, our adaptability, our ability to take the broken pieces of our past and turn them into something unstoppable. Rogers turned to his crew, his voice firm but filled with pride. So, explorers, let this story remind you of what makes us human. The galaxy doesn't fear our technology or our weapons. It fears our ingenuity, our ability to look at the impossible and say, let's try anyway, because perfection may win battles, but chaos? Chaos wins wars. The crew erupted into applause, their pride in humanity reignited. Rogers smiled, stepping back to let the moment settle. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly, a testament to the infinite possibilities that awaited. It all began when the Arxo Empire arrived, Captain Rogers said, his voice resonating through the horizon's bridge. Imagine the most advanced civilization in the galaxy, staring down at us like we were ants. Their fleet appeared out of nowhere, hundreds of colossal ships shimmering with alien energy, weapons that could turn planets into molten slag. And they weren't here to negotiate. They were here to dominate. The holographic display behind him showed the Arxo ships descending upon Earth, their massive silhouettes blotting out the stars. Rogers' expression grew darker as he continued. The Arxo didn't see us as a threat. They didn't even see us as equals. They gave us 24 hours to surrender, calling resistance inadvisable. Not futile, inadvisable. Like we weren't even worth the effort of a proper fight. Rogers gestured to an image of the Prometheus, Earth's flagship, dwarfed by the Arxo vessels. The Prometheus was our pride and joy, a symbol of humanity's technological prowess. But compared to the Arxo, it was a pebble against a tidal wave. On board, Chief Engineer Thad Jong stood in the bridge, staring at the fleet through the viewport. He muttered something about aliens finally coming to end reality TV, but underneath the humor, Thad saw something critical. The hologram shifted, highlighting the Arxo's fleet movements, flawless, synchronized, and eerily precise. They were perfect, Rogers explained. Their systems were so advanced, so standardized, that every ship operated in complete harmony. No variation, no redundancy. And Thad realized something crucial. Perfection wasn't their strength. It was their flaw. The display changed to the engineering bay of the Prometheus, where Thad worked alongside Lieutenant Commander Riley O'Malley. Her cybernetic eye gleamed as she analyzed streams of alien code, her fingers flying across multiple consoles. Riley was a genius, Rogers said, his tone fond. And a rebel. She'd hacked Earth's most secure systems as a teenager, and had a reputation for breaking rules as easily as she wrote code. Together, she and Thad devised a plan so absurd it had no business working. But in that moment, absurdity was all we had. He grinned, letting the tension ease slightly. They called it Operation Digital Stone Age. The idea? Use humanity's most outdated, inefficient, and chaotic communication methods to overwhelm the Arxo's systems. Analog signals, corrupted packets, even fax machine tones. Anything primitive enough to slip past their defenses. Admiral Chen thought they were insane, Rogers said, shaking his head. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. The Arxo's technology was millions of years ahead of ours. Their quantum encryption could shrug off even our best cyber-attacks. But Thad and Riley weren't targeting their encryption. They were targeting their arrogance. The hologram showed a growing arsenal of signals, Morse code, AM radio, early internet protocols. They compiled decades of human communication history, every mistake we'd ever made. The Arxo thought they were untouchable because they'd perfected their systems. But perfection, as Thad said, is brittle. All it takes is the right kind of chaos to shatter it. The Arxo didn't wait for the 24 hours to expire, Rogers said, his voice growing tense. Their fleet moved into attack formation, their weapons charging with enough power to turn Earth into a memory. Admiral Chen launched a conventional counterattack, stealth ships, quantum missiles, the works. The Arxo barely noticed. The hologram displayed the destruction of Earth's fleet, ships breaking apart under the onslaught of alien firepower. Our best weapons didn't even scratch their shields. It was like throwing rocks at a star. And then, just as the Arxo prepared their final strike, Thad and Riley launched their plan. The hologram burst into a cascade of signals, a chaotic storm of analog and digital noise flooding the Arxo's quantum network. The Arxo ships faltered, Rogers said, his grin widening. Their formations broke apart, their weapons misfired, and their systems stuttered. They were trying to process the signals, but couldn't categorize them. Imagine a symphony orchestra suddenly forced to play with kazoos and bagpipes. It was beautiful. The hologram showed the Arxo fleet spiraling into disarray, their perfect synchronization dissolving into chaos. The Arxo sent out frantic messages. Cease your primitive interference. Primitive. They couldn't comprehend what was happening, because they'd never considered anything so simple. Thad and Riley didn't stop, Rogers said, his tone fierce. They pushed harder, flooding the Arxo's systems with every signal they could find. AM radio, modem noises, corrupted files, everything. The Arxo's quantum network, designed to handle the most advanced threats, collapsed under the weight of human imperfection. The hologram showed the Arxo ships turning their weapons on each other, their systems failing spectacularly. They tried to reboot to recover, but it was too late. Their fleet, their pride, their perfection, it all crumbled. Rogers' tone softened as he described the aftermath. The Arxo retreated, their once mighty ships reduced to drifting hulks. When it came time for negotiations, they were desperate. We didn't ask for much: peace, some shared technology, and one final demand: introduce variation into their systems. The Arxo were so offended by the idea, I thought they'd self-destruct out of spite. He chuckled, the memory clearly amusing. But they agreed. They had no choice. Humanity had shown them that perfection isn't strength. It's fragility waiting to be broken. Rogers turned to his crew, his expression proud but solemn. So, explorers, remember this. Our strength doesn't come from perfection. It comes from our flaws, our chaos, our ability to adapt and overcome. The Arxo thought they could crush us because we weren't perfect. But they learned that imperfection, that's where humanity thrives. He gestured to the stars beyond the viewport. And the galaxy? It still tells stories about the day humanity stopped being nice and taught perfection a lesson it will never forget. 3 days after the battle, Thad and Riley stood on the Prometheus observation deck. Rogers said, a faint smile playing on his lips. Below them, Earth turned peacefully in the void, oblivious to how close it had come to destruction. The Arxo fleet limped away, their systems crippled, their pride shattered. And humanity? We celebrated not with parades or speeches, but with a quiet realization. We had won by being ourselves. He stepped back, letting the weight of the story sink in. Explorers, this is why we fight, not to prove we're perfect, but to show the galaxy that even in our chaos, we are unstoppable. Now, let's write the next chapter. As the crew erupted into applause, the horizon glided into the starry expanse, a symbol of humanity's indomitable spirit.